Hey everyone, welcome to Financial Revelations. I am David Safransky, your host. As always, you could hear me, not this morning you couldn't hear me, but every Thursday morning on WCRF 103.3 in Cleveland. You can get the Moody Radio App. It's on every app store, and you can listen from anywhere. We have people that listen in the Caribbean, from Honduras. We have people that listen in Brazil. We have people that listen in Europe and Poland, all over the United States. So you don't have to be bound by a radio to hear me on WCRF. And certainly Financial Revelations comes out on a weekly basis, so you can, they're all archived on your favorite app for podcasts. You could also get me on YouTube. So if they keep me up there, I say some things that they don't always like. And you can call here. If you wanted to talk to us, if you said, hey, tell me about your services. We manage money. We do estate planning. We do a lot of those things. And you can call here, 1-800-344-2534. And you can email Corey. And of course, if you want to know more about the well digs, the Brazilian mission that we do, you can go to nativosusa.org and you can see pictures and videos and some of the work that we've done there. You could donate if you want. You could pray for us. Always, either one of those is great. We have had a lot of people give donations. I'm very appreciative of that. So, in fact, the next podcast is going to be from the Amazon, and it's going to be about the wells, and it'll have pics and videos. We have the ability to, everybody does, to record a Zoom call, so we're going to do a Zoom call from there. I took a Starlink last year, and it worked flawlessly. In fact, Starlink, Elon Musk, who's about to win his pay package dispute and get it's now, I think, $48 billion he's owed. With the new rocket that he has, the largest object ever to take off from the ground, he's going to quadruple the power of Starlink. It is just incredible what he has done. He has reinvented so many things. To watch, he's the greatest American who's not an American ever, I think. One of the greatest, who's not a soldier. But anyway, it's going to be great, awesome. And I'll be on the boat. I got to stay pretty close to the router. It's the one thing that the router for Starlink, if you don't have mesh routers, I do at my house. If you don't have mesh routers, you're a little bit limited on distance from the router. So maybe, Elon, if you're watching this again, maybe you could work on that range question. So I told you I wasn't going to do this again, but I'm going to do it again. Here we go again. We're going to talk about the Fed, because yesterday there was a Fed meeting, and Chair Powell ended the meeting with no rate hike, no rate cut. And in fact, yesterday at the meeting, when there was no rate cut, no rate change at all, the big news is that the Fed puts together this data sheet called the dot plot. And they usually do it after the meetings, but their dot plot, which is the expected interest rate, in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, all the way out, probably like a year, there is only one expected rate cut this year, and that's coming from the Fed. And I think that they might not even do that. Maybe one rate cut. I said last time that I thought it would be in November, because there's a Fed meeting on election day, and they come out the next day with their change, if any, to interest rates. And I think that's where they could start. I think that's where they could do one rate cut. If they're going to do one rate cut, it would not make sense to do it before the election, because it would look political. Even if it's not, it's going to look that way. And they don't really need to cut rates. The unemployment rate is up a little bit, but not that bad. CPI is still elevated. The producer price index came out today, and it was negative. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but they're going to need 3-4 months of that before they could even, that's a trend. 1 month, we saw this where we had low inflation was kind of shrinking early in the year, and then it took off again. Then they had 5 straight readings in a row of increasing inflation. So they certainly don't have enough information to cut rates yet. And they don't need to. The market's at all-time highs. Unemployment's still very low. The growth in GDP is slowing. There's no way that Joe Biden's going to be president again. And I'm going to talk about how Donald Trump could lower inflation immediately, have a direct impact on inflation, not day one, but maybe day 8. He could start having an impact on inflation. And it's real. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's not gimmicks. It's real stuff that we could do to grow the economy. And it's what he could do is provide the mother's milk for a growing, vibrant, dynamic capitalist economy. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I want you to know something. You knew that there were going to be no rate cuts or maybe one rate cut this year. You knew that in November of last year, because that's when I started telling you there's no way they could cut rates 6 times in 24. It's impossible. And the market was living on what we call hopium, where it's this inert gas that gets into people's head, and it gives them a hope that isn't real, but they want to believe it's so bad that they just keep repeating it. But I've been saying since November of last year that there were not going to be 6 rate cuts this year. And in fact, they should have raised rates in November and December. And a lot of the Fed governors, well, half of them that are voting members, said the exact same thing, that they should raise rates. And I don't think they're going to raise rates. I don't think that's on the table right now. And never put it out. In 1970s, they raised rates and then they stopped. And then they raised rates and then they stopped. And what kept happening is inflation would get a foothold. And it's hard to slow down. This economy, far more complex today than it was in 1970, is even more difficult to turn around than it was in 1970. And they couldn't do it then. It took Paul Volcker raising rates to 15% to turn the economy around. And so the Fed, we've heard this and heard this and heard this and heard this about the Fed trying to engineer a soft landing. And that's what I really want to talk about today, because we need to get this straight. So let's talk about the Fed's mission to create a soft landing and what exactly that means. Now, there's 2 things that the Fed could do here. Well, there's more than 2 things, but in a direct sense, in the simplest version, there's really 2 ways that the Fed could do this. One, they think that their version of soft landing, which I'm going to tell you right now is a lie, and I'll tell you why. Their version, the Fed's version of a soft landing, is bringing in the growth of inflation down to 2%. Now you'd say, wow, that's pretty good. Inflation only at 2%. That does sound like a soft landing, doesn't it? I mean, it was 9% last year, so 2% certainly soft compared to 9%, right? It would seem that way. And that means that all the prices at the grocery store are going to go down, right? No, it doesn't mean that. In fact, the effects of inflation are cumulative. So in 2022, we had 7%. So here were prices in 2021. 2022, they're 7% higher. And then we had 2023, which was 9% higher. So here's 2021, 2023, this is where prices are. Inflation's still going up by about 5% this year. So prices, from the time that Joe Biden took office, they are up in the most important things that we do, plus 20%. The costs are up 20% to live your life exactly the same way as you were doing in 2019. And the Fed is saying, well, if we just make the prices go up from here at 2%, that's a soft landing. And I would say that's a lie. There is nothing soft about your cost being 22, 23, sometimes 25% higher. Energy costs are 30% higher now than when Joe Biden took office. 30%. Now, if you have money, if you're living, if you're not living lean, it's probably not that big of a deal. But most people don't live there. Most people kind of live on the economic margin, at the edge of their ability, and you just raise their costs on average about 21, 22%. They cannot live. People are, just yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, there's articles about people skipping meals now. Is that what we're coming down to? Skipping meals? Pretty soon we'll be eating cats, which I'm not totally against. I don't want to eat one, but if you put it in a crock pot, I think by 6 o'clock it'd be pretty tasty. So That's the Fed's version of a soft landing. Now, the other thing that they could have done, and they decided not to, is they could have driven us into a recession. Now you say, well, gosh, why would you want to do that? I mean, that sounds bad, doesn't it? Well, inflation hurts virtually everybody. Inflation, it's the top 5% of income earners that inflation doesn't hurt. So 95% of people are being lambasted, beat up, and abused by inflation right now from the Biden administration and a poorly run Fed, but mainly the Biden administration. So 95% of people are beat up. If you go into a recession, maybe unemployment goes to 5.5%, 6%, which again, I don't want to see people lose their jobs. I'm not advocating for a recession. I'm telling you these are the things that the Fed can do. And when you go into a recession, one of the things that happens that's different than the Fed's soft landing right now is that prices actually come down, because you kind of destroy a little bit of the demand for things like cars and houses and boats and RVs and vacation homes and things like that. Prices actually reset lower. So that is why the Fed, when inflation gets out of control like the Biden administration let it, knowingly, it was a plan, they did it on purpose, by the way, the Fed's usual modus operandi is to create a recession. Get some people out of work, put them on government assistance, bring prices down. So now, not as many people can afford a house. So what happens? Houses sit a bit longer, prices come down. You see what's happening? Housing prices, the cost of shelter, that's what we call it, because it includes purchases, rentals, land contracts, all those things. The purchase of shelter is up 25% since Joe Biden took office. Now, if you own a house and you're selling it, that's great. If you don't own a house and you're buying it, not only are you paying 25% more for shelter, but you're also getting a 7.5% mortgage. That is just untenable. So that's why the other thing that the Fed could have done is put us into a recession. But they chose not to do that. Now, I got to be careful here because I had a friend one time who said the definition of a recession is when your neighbor's out of work. The definition of a depression is when you're out of work. I don't want to see people out of work, but I also don't want to see people paying 25% more for something just 3 years later. And it's not our fault that we are in this position. It's the Biden administration's fault that we're in this position. Jimmy Carter lived long enough, just long enough, because he's elderly, he's in hospice. He was the greatest ex-president probably of all time because he's very charitable. He did horrible president, but a great ex-president. He lived long enough just to not be the worst president in America's history. It is now the Biden administration. He's basically comatose walking through this. I don't know who's running the show, but there's no way it can be him. This is way too complex. And it's their fault that we have what we have right now. And I think the Fed really is going to have to, if we choose to reset prices, the Fed is going to have to choose to put us into a small recession. They're so worried that it's going to get out of hand. And maybe they should be. Maybe this is a house of cards. It's hard to tell when you're in it if it is a house of cards. It's way easier after the fact to look back and say, oh yeah, why don't we see that? But here's what I think is going to happen. You're going to have these higher prices for longer until Donald Trump gets reelected. And this is how he's going to affect inflation. So when you have an economy like ours, it's very complex. It's very complex. There's services, there's goods, there's manufacturing, there's all these different sectors of the economy. And a lot of our economy gets manufactured here, goes someplace else. Some of it gets manufactured someplace else and comes here. So all these different things are affected by what we call Forex or foreign exchange. The way to get inflation down immediately, and the Biden administration is going to try and trick you on this, but don't let it happen. It's a lie when they do it. It's not a lie when Trump does it. The way to get inflation down on day 8, and I say day 8 because day 1 we're going to be celebrating. There's a new sheriff in town. Actually, there's an old sheriff back in town. The way to get inflation down almost immediately is to provide cheap, reliable, repeatable, and efficient energy. The New Green Deal is inflationary by nature because it takes out of our system things like coal and oil and replaces it with high-priced, low-density energy that costs a lot of money to repeat. Oil and natural gas cost hardly anything. And the Biden administration has gone out of their way to close off these avenues of cheap energy to grow our economy and keep prices low. If Donald Trump came out and said, we're going to drill until oil is $35 a barrel, you would start to see prices reset. It's the best chance that we have to reset prices lower. Now, there is going to be some pain in this because let's say that you bought a house right now. Well, the price of that house might go down for a little bit before it starts rising again. And most people don't buy a house for a year anyway, so it's not that I don't want to see anybody lose money. I want to see everybody working. I want to see everybody wealthy. Okay, we live in a country where you could get wealthy. It doesn't matter what family you came from. It doesn't matter what color you are. That's what I love about capitalism. In a world where you could be anything, be a free market capitalist. It's the kindest thing you could be. When people say, in a world where you could be anything, be kind. What does that mean? But if I could help you create wealth, if I could help you provide for your family, not me helping you, but just providing this, the structure, the framework for you to go out, take an idea, build it, grow it, achieve it, sell it. Or build it, grow it, achieve it, work it. Pass it on to your family. Let your kids do it. These are the things that capitalism provides that just being kind doesn't provide. Okay, you could do whatever you want with your money. You could give it to the Democrats if you want. That's stupid, but you could. But that's what wealth creation does. And that's why capitalism is the kindest thing that you could do. Be a free market capitalist. Drill for oil. Send natural gas to Europe so they're not buying it from Russia. We're financing a war in Ukraine against Russia, and all of Europe is buying natural gas from Russia, financing the war against Ukraine. This is stupid. The Biden administration shut down the natural gas, the liquefied natural gas ports that was exporting natural gas to Europe. We are the Saudi Arabia plus of natural gas. We could be providing the whole world with natural gas and benefiting from it monetarily, making us wealthy. And that's what we should be doing. That's why when Donald Trump gets reelected, he is going to make the price of energy way cheaper, and that is going to bring down the cost of everything. What Joe Biden is going to do, and we're already seeing this, they're going to manipulate the price of oil going into the election, but we know they're all new Green Deal. They don't want you driving a gas car. They want to drive them. They're going to force you to drive an EV and pay $95,000 for it and then raise the price of energy to charge it. This is what's happening. You got to see this, people. Look, I'm here to help you. Take the help, okay? Take the help. This is for free, for heaven's sakes. Some people pay for this kind of advice. You're getting it for free. Vote Donald Trump. Get cheap energy, bring prices down. Oh, I don't like his personality. Shut up. Oh my gosh. You're such a baby. Look, get over it already, okay? We've never elected the perfect president. We're not going to do it this time. He's way better than what he was, but he's going to offend some people, and you just have to take that, okay? Because the benefits far outweigh the costs. Hear me now. Believe me later. I am David Safransky, a real American, a true gun-owning patriot, and the voice you can trust.